What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point2Point NHL Recap Show, Season 2, Episode 11. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark Alvarez. We got World Juniors to talk about today. It's quarterfinals day, so that's pretty exciting. But before we get into all that, Mark, it's officially the new year. We're in 2025. How's the new year going for you so far? And did you do anything fun on New Year's Eve?
Yeah, dude. Happy New Year to you, man. It's been pretty good so far. I'm just enjoying the rest of my vacation here in Newfoundland before I head home tomorrow. Just kind of went out to like a neighbor's place here and just drank, played some darts, watched the last couple World Junior games. We're like an hour and a half ahead here too. So, I mean, the game actually didn't finish till technically after midnight here either. So it was pretty good night though, for the most part. Kind of disappointing how Canada played for the most part. But I mean, they're kind of keeping us on our toes this year, eh?
Oh, yeah, there.
It feels like this has been one of the weaker teams. Obviously, we'll kind of get into that a little bit, but I mean, that's what I've been up to, man. What'd you get up to on New Year's Eve?
New Year's Eve, of course, I watched the game. It was kind of embarrassing for Canada. I did not like what I was seeing. If you're a United States fan, you're probably liking what you're seeing right now. You got some of the teams starting to roll here as we go into the quarterfinals. Yeah, I pretty much just watched the game, had a couple buddies over, and then after the game was over, we went over to my other buddies. And funny enough, man, we were at my buddies and we're all like playing darts in the basement, no TV or anything, just listening to music. Next thing you know, somebody's like, "Oh shit, it's 12:02."
No way.
Yeah, we
funny.
completely missed the countdown and everything, but it was a fun time just playing darts, drinking, playing some pool, ping pong, just all over.
Man, the guy's house I was at, like me and these three other guys were watching the game, and he flipped the channel to like the news like a minute before, and like, dude, I'm not like USA scored their third goal like right at midnight here. Like, dude, it was like, I'm not even kidding. It was 11:59 and 50 seconds. They scored the goal, and I'm like, change it. It's fine. I don't even give a shit about the rest of this game. So we changed the channel back for like the 1 minute, and then we changed it back right for New Year's. But it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was a good New Year's, honestly. Let's get right into the World Juniors. Talk about that. Currently, Sweden and Latvia, they're playing. It's 3-2 right now in the third period. So honestly, we could have an upset here depending on what happens here within the final 14 minutes or so. Later on after this game, Switzerland and the United States are going to be playing. We've got Slovakia and Finland playing at 5 o'clock Eastern. And at 7 o'clock, we got Canada, Czechia to wrap up the quarterfinals day. Let's talk about this Latvia-Sweden game, though, that's going on right now. Mark, could you see an upset here?
Well, kind of as we're recording this right now, I'm watching on the side here, just about 14 minutes left. Dude, these guys are down 3-0, and they're making it 3-2 now. I know Sweden scored a fourth goal that got called back, so I don't know if that kind of changed a little momentum in their favor. Latvia has been pretty solid, and like, we're not even just talking about like one game against Canada. Like, I mean, they played pretty well against the States, even though they lost 5-1. It was 1-0 halfway through the game. Ended up beating Germany. Fell a little bit short to Finland, but I mean, all those games on New Year's Eve like meant something in accordance to standings. Like, we didn't really have any games that didn't mean anything. Even the night before, man, Latvia and Germany was a pretty solid game, which basically meant that Germany wasn't going to make it on, and they ended up not getting relegated. They beat Kazakhstan today, actually, so they'll be staying in the tournament. But I've been pretty impressed with Latvia, man. They've only got a couple of guys on their team that are drafted. That Matiko guy has been pretty good for them. He's a Washington draft pick. Their goaltender's been unbelievable, man. He plays in the queue. He's got like an .899 save percentage in the queue, and dude, he looks like honestly, man, I would take a flyer on him with a late round pick this year if he keeps playing solid like this. Like, I don't know, like if he can steal a game like that, you never know what he can do in the future, right? So I've been pretty impressed with Latvia. I could definitely see an upset here, just considering like Sweden's history and kind of playoff play in this tournament. They've been unbelievable in the round robins, but don't they have one gold in the last like 14 years or something? Like, I don't know, man. They made it to the gold medal game a couple times, but I mean, they've kind of been known to choke. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Latvia ends up taking this, but I will say Sweden's looked pretty good this tournament. Like, they're one of the teams where I don't really have a lot of question marks about so far, but I mean, they haven't played Canada, US, or Finland yet either, right? So I don't think they're going to end up winning it, and I think Sweden will end up winning this game, but honestly, dude, I would not be surprised if Latvia like came back and tied this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Sweden's going to end up winning this. I have them going deep in the tournament, to be honest. But Latvia, like, it wouldn't overly surprise me if they pulled off the upset here. You sort of talked about Sweden and the narrative that they don't make it deep in the playoff format of the tournament, right? Like right now, if you're Latvia, you don't have the pressure. All the pressure right now is on Sweden. It's a close game. If Latvia scores a goal here, it's a tie game. Sweden's really going to be nervous at that point, right? So you'll start to have the nerves sort of playing into factor. And for Latvia's goalie, like he's played phenomenal so far in this tournament. When you look at his stats here, he has just above 3 goals against average. His save percentage he has a 92 save percentage, and he has faced a lot of shots as well. He's faced 170 under Carter George, who has arguably been the best goaltender in this tournament. He's only faced 83 shots, right? So Latvia's goaltenders faced double the shots here, and he's looked phenomenal so far. So, man, if Latvia can pull this off, it would be amazing. But honestly, I still sort of gotta take Sweden winning this game.
Well, did you see that their goalie? Sorry, did you see that he played Canada and the U.S. in like less than 24 hours? Because they had an afternoon game the day after they beat Canada, and he only let in 3 of the 7 goals at 5-on-5. And I think he had like a 960 something save percentage at 5-on-5 against Canada and the U.S. Like, man, just unbelievable. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's move on here.
Yeah. So next up, we're gonna have that United States versus Switzerland game. I think I'm going with the United States taking it here. Right now I think Sweden USA is going to be the finals. Not quite sure who
repeat of last year.
Yeah, not quite sure who I have coming out if they both make it to the finals, but I think United States is going to beat Switzerland fairly easy. Do you think the same is going to sort of happen here? Or?
Yeah, I do, man. I think USA's kind of hitting their groove now. I think they're going to have a lot of confidence coming out of beating Canada. I think USA didn't really impress me too much until kind of late near the Canada game. Like, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I had some question marks about them going into that New Year's Eve game. Like, yeah, they scored 10 against Germany. They also let in 4. To be honest, they didn't really look too good against Finland. Like, Augustine kept them in most of that game and basically got them to overtime. I thought that's when Finland really started hitting their stride, was against the U.S., right? So I had some question marks about the U.S. I know how good and talented they are. Like, even their goalie, too. I love Augustine. Like, I mean, but he kind of struggled at the beginning of the tournament here. But, I mean, dude, I think they're kind of hitting their stride now. I think that we're going to see a really dangerous U.S. team. Honestly, like, Cole Hudson's been playing unbelievable. A couple other guys in their team been super effective. Like, dude, how many freaking posts did Leonard hit against the States or against Canada? Him, Hagens, Perreault's looking pretty good. Honestly, if Augustine's kind of in his groove now and US can kind of play to their capabilities, I don't really see them losing this tournament. And one guy who I think hasn't really got even going yet, and I think will, is Zeev Bouillon. I think Hudson's been kind of taking like the reins in that, like running the power play and stuff like that. But I mean, I think the U.S. has got a really good chance to win this tournament, man. I think no matter who they're playing, I feel like I'm going to have them as the favorite against them moving forward, because I think they just got it at every position, right? Like Canada, everyone online's talking about they can't score, they take too many penalties. It's like Canada's or U.S. is pretty solid at every position, dude. They got people that can score. They got power forwards. They got playmakers. They've got some pretty solid defensemen. Like, dude, one guy I've been pretty impressed with is like Logan Hensler. Like, he's a pretty solid 2-way defenseman that I think his stockpile is going up for the draft this year a bit. I think he's probably, I would say, guaranteed top 15 after this World Junior. But then you got the offensive defensemen in Bouillon and Hudson, and then we've got Augustine and net, and even their backup Slakinski. Like, he's been like one of the best goalies in college hockey this year. So it's like, I don't know, man. I think USA is definitely the favorite. The favorite does not always win, obviously, but I think they've got a pretty good chance to repeat this year.
Yeah, they're for sure looking good so far. And you mentioned Ryan Leonard there. And the thing that I'd be the most worried about if I was going into a game against the USA is, like, I feel like Ryan Leonard really hasn't sort of dominated this tournament yet, where it's like,
no, I don't think so either.
If you're going into a game and you know that Ryan Leonard's there, and just even the play style he plays, where he sort of plays like that Matthew and Brady Tkachuk, where he plays sort of feisty and gets under his opponent's skins. Like, if he can start really scoring here, though, then, man, I'd be really worried if I was facing this USA team. And for sure, like, maybe this game against Switzerland, Ryan Leonard gets a couple points here and he's really feeling himself going into the semifinals. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from Team USA. And yeah, I'm with you. I have them going deep, and I think they probably are the favorites so far in this tournament. Let's move on and talk about this 5 o'clock game, though. It's going to be between Slovakia and Finland. Honestly, man, this one's a toss up for me. I don't know who I sort of have winning this one right now. Who do you have winning that though?
Dude, this is a tough one, man. I totally agree. Like, I feel like Slovakia is like a lot better than people are giving them credit for.
Yep.
Um, the one thing that I think might be the X factor in this tournament is, or sorry, not in this tournament, in this game is, dude, I have really been impressed with Finland's goalie. As a goalie, that Petteri Rimpinen guy, man, I thought he played unbelievable against Canada, even though they lost. He made some great saves in that game to keep them in it. He's been super consistent throughout this tournament. He's a guy that I honestly thought was going to get drafted last year, and he got passed. I think teams might be taking a look at him this year. He's playing pretty good in Liga. I forget where exactly he's playing, but he's been up there as like if you had him as goalie of the tournament, even though his stats aren't as good as George's, I wouldn't really disagree with you, dude. I think he's helped Finland a lot in this tournament. Honestly, I think I'm gonna go with Slovakia, dude, though. I love Dalibor Dvorsky. I think he was not talked about enough in that draft a couple years ago. He went 10th overall. He's got a good shot at making the NHL next year, I think. I think he's playing the AHL right now, if I'm not mistaken. He
Yeah,
was
he
playing in the
is.
O last year at Sudbury. He's leading forwards and scoring right now. He's looking really good. This game, I don't know if you'd call it an upset, maybe a little slight upset. Finland maybe favored it a little bit, would you say? If you were on the lines, like maybe a plus 150, like plus 130. Like I'd say
If
pretty
I,
close though, no?
it's got to be pretty close. I don't know what the exact lines are right now, but honestly, like based off how this tournament's gone so far, I'd maybe even say Slovakia is the favorite. Like when you talk about Finland, they're not scoring a ton in this tournament. Their power play hasn't been good at all. Their power play's rolling at only 13% right now, right? Like Slovakia has the better power play. So it's like I think Slovakia has a bit better offense, but Finland maybe all around defensively is a bit better. But
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to Slovakia and if they can score. Because if Slovakia can score and get going on the power play, I think they're going to take this game. To be honest, you talk about that Dvorsky kid. He's looked phenomenal so far. He's probably up in contention right now for the best forward of the tournament. We're going to talk about that later and who we have as the best forward so far. But he's looked really good, and I agree with you that I think he'll be in the NHL next year. Honestly, for me, I got Slovakia taking this game.
And look, they had a little bit of a scare there against Kazakhstan, and I honestly think like they're gonna learn from like, dude, we can't take this shit lightly at all, no matter who we're playing. And man, honestly, like Kazakhstan at points was not as bad as I thought they were. Like, I mean, they got blown out a couple times, but I mean, for them to come back and force OT and like, man, they almost didn't get relegated too either, right? So like. I don't know, just kind of kudos to them as well. But I mean, Slovakia's got some pretty talented players, man. It's not even just like Dvorsky, like this
Yeah,
Yuri Pekarsik kid. I think he's also drafted by St. Louis, Maxim Sturback. He got the OT winner against Kazakhstan in that game. The only thing is, I would say like Slovakia probably has one of the more weaker goaltenders in the tournament. I think Samuel Urban, he plays in the USHL. I think he's not drafted. But I mean, this is also a very good tournament for goaltenders, I would argue. A lot of goalies are playing really well and helping their teams win games. But I think I'm going with Slovakia in this game, man.
yeah, I'm with you on that. The thing that I find the most interesting about this year's tournament is the fact that I feel like this year's tournament is the most wide open it's ever been, where it's like you have no clue who's going to win gold, who's coming third, who's going to be the runner up and win silver, right? Like I feel like there's like in most tournaments it feels like there's three, four teams that you feel actually have a chance of winning gold coming like second, third. Where honestly, this tournament, man, like anybody in the quarterfinals wouldn't surprise me if they got a medal. Like the
Yeah.
way this tournament's been going, this tournament feels the most wide open it's really ever been in my memory of the World Juniors. And just one more thing before we move on to talk about that Czechia Canada game coming up later. You mentioned the goaltending and how it's been pretty decent tournament so far for goaltending. What do you think the highest goals against average is in the tournament, and then the second highest goals against average?
I don't know Kazakhstan's goalie's name. I would assume his is probably the highest. Um,
Yep.
I just don't know which games he played exactly. I would argue they got blown out, right, by Czechia. I'm going to take a wild guess. I'm going to say his GAA is 6.25, the
Dude, you're
highest.
really, really close. His goals against average right now, well, his goals against average for the tournament is 6.07, and he
Okay.
started all 5 games for Kazakhstan. The next highest goals against average is
Oh, it's
Slovakia's
it's
goalie,
Nikitin, isn't it? Vladimir Nikitin.
Vladimir
Yeah, that's
Nikitin,
his name. He's
is
actually drafted
Czechia.
by Ottawa.
Okay,
Yeah, he
interesting.
played in the BCHL last year, and I think he's in Russia this year. And sorry, the Slovakia. I think I did see his online somewhere. Is it like high threes, 375?
3.28.
Okay, okay. So I mean
But
that's a big difference, right? But I mean, like, dude, he's facing so much rubber with Kazakhstan, right? So I mean, like he helped keep his team in some of those games. So
for me, just the fact that like the second worst goals against average throughout this tournament is 3.28, I find that crazy considering usually how many blowouts there are in this tournament, high scoring games. Like it feels
100%.
like a 3.28 is a second worst goals against average in the tournament is honestly pretty good. Let's move on though and talk about the big game we're all going to be watching in Canada tonight. It's Canada versus Czechia. Mark, who do you have one in this?
Dude, man, this is a repeat of last year's quarterfinals. Obviously, Canada really wants this one back. But man, I think Czechia, dude, it feels like they're getting better like every year. Like, regardless if it's
Yeah,
World Juniors, like they win the World Championship last year. Like, if they were in this Four Nations thing or if they extended it up to like six, like I think they'd compete against a bunch of teams, man. I have just not been impressed with Canada for the most part. I understand they're a really talented team. I don't know exactly what the issue is. I think it's kind of a couple things, right? Like, I've basically watched every single game except for the third period against Finland. This team's very undisciplined. They're not really learning to stay out of the box and take these dumb penalties. Um, they don't really have anyone besides Dickinson. I'd argue maybe Bonk a little bit that can actually move the puck up the ice.
yep,
And it feels like they have a bunch of guys on this team that want to set, like they almost want to set someone else up, but then when it's like not working, it kind of feels like they're getting selfish. Does that make sense? Like it feels like there's a bunch of playmakers on the team, but then they're realizing it's not working. And look, I don't want to be a dead horse, but like Cowan comes to mind right away. Honestly, I've
yep,
seen it with Jaeger a lot too. He's been very underwhelming in this tournament. And it's like I think Cowan's taken a ton of heat. Like I do understand what people are saying about him, and it makes sense. But you can't sit here and tell me that he hasn't been one of the more effective forwards on this team. I'm sorry, you can't. I understand he hasn't been great, but like he's been one of the better forwards on this team. I don't like this coach, to be honest. I hate going and blaming the coach, but every game, it's like I look at the time on ice and dude, I don't think McKenna's played 15 minutes in a single game. I don't think he has. And I mean, I think it's hard for him to go out there and kind of gain his positioning and like his feel of the game because of how little he's on the ice compared to how he usually is, right?
yep,
And he's playing like in the bottom six. This guy loves Luca Pinelli because he coaches him in Ottawa. I don't get it. McKenna's played every second of the tournament with Pinelli. It's like he doesn't want to mix up lines. And now it's even like Rakoff's coming out tonight. Martone's going in. Those guys haven't played a second together in this tournament, and they're one of the best duos in junior hockey right now on a line, right?
yeah,
I really do not understand it. I think it more just comes back to like they didn't take the proper players for this team. Like we were talking about this before the tournament, and I think it's really showing at this point. I think for the most part, Carter George has actually bailed them out a lot. Like even against fucking Germany, dude. Like you could have argued Germany had multiple opportunities to tie that game. They could have before Canada made that 2-0, right? Even Ivan Kovac against Latvia, dude. It's like he's fucking keeping them in the game. He stopped 7 in a shootout. Like it's like Canada's goaltending is usually a question mark. I have no problem with him. They've been great. I don't even think I blame Carter George for a single goal the U.S. scored. Every single one they were walking in, and it felt for a while like that game against the States, Canada, their best stretch was a part of the second period where they had a couple chances. They were out shooting them by a bunch. They weren't really getting the most quality shots at times, but it felt like George had like 12 saves, and it was like 7 of them were like unbelievable. Like it was like they just didn't have any defense around him. And I'm like, oh my God, like this could be way worse, right? Like I'm not too optimistic about Canada heading into this game. I think Czechia has been super impressive. Their goaltender, I think, can definitely shut Canada down because some of these other goalies who were basically, I don't want to say no one's coming into this tournament, but we didn't really know about some of these guys are shutting Canada down. This Michael Hrabal guy is playing unreal in college this year.
Yeah.
Honestly, dude, I've got Czechia winning this, and I think it's going to be like a 2-1, 3-2 game. And I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's overtime.
I'm on board with this. I think Czechia is winning, and I agree. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think Canada, when you talk about Canada, like this team cannot score whatsoever, dude. They have 10 goals so far in the tournament, and their shooting percentage is just below 6%. Like
Yeah.
when you and like I don't want to blame the players so much because I don't think it's full like part of it is on the players, but I'm with you, dude. I think this is a big big part on the management and the coaching of this team. Like when you talk about the roster selection and what we were saying before the tournament, and how did some of these players not make the team? Like we look at their power play run by Sam Dickinson, dude. Their power plays look horrendous so far.
Dude, Sam Dickinson wasn't even running the frickin' power play to start the tournament. Did you see that? Bonk was quarterbacking,
Yeah,
and they were asking him about it, and he's like, "This isn't something I'm used to, but I'm gonna have to adjust." Buddy, your fucking defense partner runs the power play in the OHL. He's got more goals than any defenseman in the CHL. He's almost at 2 points a game. He's a great player, and they're not even putting him in the right position to succeed. Why hasn't Gavin McKenna been given a chance on this power play, dude? I don't fucking understand. Like, I get if you want to start off with Cowan, Dickinson, Bonk. If it's not working after a game and a half, 2 games, fuck them. Fuck them. Put them on the second power play. This is a short tournament, dude. It doesn't matter if Cowan's got a 6-game point streak in the O. If it's not working there, move him down to the second one. Maybe put him in a different position on the power play. It's not working where he's at right now. And sorry, I don't mean to just blame Cowan because it's really not his fault. There's other guys here that really haven't been performing whatsoever that I've been super disappointed in, to be honest with you, on this team. Like, honestly, one guy who's been driving me nuts in this tournament on defense is Andrew Gibson. I do not understand why he's on this team. Like, he's supposed to be the stay-at-home shutdown guy. Dude, I think he's given the puck away more than anyone else in this tournament. Like, I just don't fucking understand it at all.
There's been times even too I've noticed with him, like when Canada's in the offensive zone, his positioning in the offensive zone hasn't been great, and then it ends up that there's a like odd man rush for the opposing team just because he's not in a great position in the offensive zone. They break out the puck and he's like a foot or two behind. Even Sam Dickinson so far, I've noticed that Sam Dickinson has been very slow on his feet when he's pivoting to go back. Like he's had
been
at least
pretty undisciplined too, dude.
He's had at least 2 holding penalties so far in this tournament, just because he has a little bit of a lack of foot speed and he's getting beat on the outside by these offensive players, and he's forced to take a bad penalty there. Like for me, this roster it makes no sense how it was constructed. They have a lack of scoring, and you look at the players that didn't get taken. Michael Hage, he's ripping up the NCAA this year for Michigan, right? You got Michael Musa leading the OHL in points. You got Carter Yakimchuk, who almost made the Ottawa Senators out of training camp, and you had 30 goals as a defense.
Start to the year too.
Like Zane Parekh, you think Zane Parekh or Carter Yakimchuk, if they were on this team, they'd be able to help out with their power play? I think without a doubt they'd be able to.
Dude, I'm also looking at Andrew Crystal too, dude. He almost has a goal a game in the WHL. Like this is the.
I think he's on pace for like 130 points.
Like, I mean, that's a guy that I'd be taking. I'm more just like flabbergasted that like okay, dude, we're in this tournament with all these, as much as there's question marks about this team, the guys they took have skill. They're good players. I could see pretty much all of them. At least, I don't know if they're going to have successful NHL careers, but I could see them probably all getting a chance at some point. Why the hell are we putting 2D on the power play when we have all this skill? Like, I don't understand. Bonk, I mean, I see him being like a potential like top 4 two-way defenseman, maybe maxing out at like a 40-point career high. I more see him as like a two-way guy. Why is this guy on the first power play? One guy who I've looked at and they've been underutilizing, and I feel that it's the same position as McKenna where they're not giving enough opportunity to get going, is Bradley Nadeau. Like, why aren't we putting him on the freaking power play, dude? Like, he's actually one of the guys on this team that is a goal scorer. Like, I just think there's a lot of guys on this team that are being, as much as it's like, okay, this is the roster we got. I know there's a lot of question marks. Let's try to make it work with what we have. And it's like he's barely even changing anything up in that aspect. You know what I mean? I don't understand it, man.
Yeah, it's definitely weird roster construction and a weird year overall from Canada, just with not only the roster construction, but the style of hockey they're playing. Like the fact that going into tournaments year in, year out, Canada's usually the favorite, where like even going into this tournament, a lot of people were talking about Team Canada. Like, man, I think on paper they're maybe like the fourth, third best team at best, right? So it's definitely a weird year for this team Canada and everything that's going on with them.
Has there been anyone on Czechia that's impressed you a lot, you think? Really?
On Czechia, the Edward Saleh guy. He's
that's what I was
impressed me.
gonna say too, dude. Kitchener Ranger last year. He's playing in the AHL this year with Coachella. I mean, he's actually had a pretty good season there too. I really like the way he's playing. Honestly, kind of happy Adam Juracek's back too. Like he's healthy. He's playing again. He was playing in the O a little bit before this tournament got underway. But I mean, they've got a pretty decent team, dude. They've got some guys that have been drafted. Like Adam Jecko was taken by the Blues last year. Like, yeah, we're talking about Edward Saleh as well. So, I mean, they've got a really good team, and their goalie's a monster, man. He's like 6'6". Like, he kind of struggled a little bit in the tournament last year. Like, he got pulled in the bronze medal game. But, I mean, he's been pretty solid so far, man. I totally see this being like another low-scoring game, 2-1, 3-2 win for Czechia tonight.
The thing with Czechia, too, is like they can score, man. They got 3 players right now that are top 10 in tournament scoring, and they got 5 that are top 50 in tournament scoring, too, right? So, like, this isn't a game where Canada can score 1 goal or 2 goals and really rely on winning the game. Like Czechia is going to put up a fight, and if Canada can't score like they haven't been able to so far in this tournament, like Czechia is going to take the game, and that's going to be how it is, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know what comes next for Team Canada. Honestly, I think you just sort of forget about this tournament and don't ever look back on it, to be honest. But one question for you before we sort of move on to the next little segment I have here. You mentioned USA is your favorites right now. So do you really think that's your favorite to win the tournament?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think USA. Sweden wouldn't surprise me.
They just ended up clinching that against Latvia. Dude, what a performance from this goalie, man. 3 goals on 50 shots.
Yeah,
like,
against Sweden, too. Like, it's not like it's 50 shots for coming from Kazakhstan.
Okay, like, I know we're going to get into this, but, like, would you give him player, like, even potentially goalie of the tournament, even getting out in the quarters? Like, do you think is that, like, an insane take?
I'd strongly consider it after this performance, to be honest.
Strongly consider it. Like, I feel so bad for this guy. Fuck. Would have loved to see him play for a medal. But yeah, sorry, let's keep going here.
Let's move on and talk about some players in the tournament, because, of course, there is a lot of scouts at the World Juniors year in, year out. You see footage of all these scouts. So I want to talk about some of the players. Mark, what players in this tournament have had their stock lowered with their play so far? Like, are there any,
like, in accordance to, like, even if they're drafted, like, maybe it's like I don't think of them as highly as a prospect anymore or something like that.
Yeah, even if they're drafted. Like, for me, a big one that comes to mind, honestly, is Easton Cowan. I know you were talking about him here a bit earlier when we were talking about Team Canada. Like, for me, Easton Cowan comes to mind a lot, because when you talk about Easton Cowan in the OHL, like, he won MVP of the OHL last year, 50 50 game point streak, right? Like phenomenal player. Like his stock since he was drafted up until this tournament is really just gone up, right? Like a, a lot of people were thinking this guy's going to be has the potential maybe to be a point per game scorer at some point in the NHL. Where
Yeah.
honestly, for me, after this tournament and sort of seeing the performance, like the biggest thing for me that I've noticed that he really hasn't been able to do in this tournament is he does not look like he can drive his own line in scoring, right? Like, and if he can't do that in this tournament, I really do have doubts if he can do that in the NHL. And I think his stock is sort of taking a little bit of a tumble here. But like, are there any players for you?
Um, a little bit on. I was talking about Andrew Gibson a bit. I kind of have some doubts about him becoming an NHL regular defenseman, to be honest with you. He was actually drafted by Detroit and then traded to Nashville like 6 months later. I don't know. I don't really see, unless he kind of gets his like offensive skill up a bit and learns how to move the puck a bit better. I'm not really convinced that he's going to be an everyday NHLer. I think Cole Hudson's stock has gone up a bit. I know we're kind of talking about both here going up and going down. I more looked at him as a potential top four defenseman. I think now we could be even talking about top pairing and
Yeah,
running a power play in the future. Him and Cole, is it weird? Sorry, him and Lane, like his brother. Like, obviously, I watch him a ton, right? Being on the Habs, but I would argue they're very similar, but they're also very different. It's kind of weird.
yeah,
Like they
yeah,
both do those same types of moves. I would say Cole is more aggressive, though. I feel like he goes at guys more. Meanwhile, Lane kind of does his thing and he kind of waits for you to bite. But he does. But
yeah,
Lane also does attack at times, right? Like it's not like he never does. But I feel like Cole every time in this tournament, he's like, boom, he's right at you with his moves right away. Meanwhile, Lane's kind of sitting back and he waits for you to kind of make that first move, and then he will sometimes embarrass you. You know what I mean? So in accordance to stock going up, I mean Cole Hudson, Gibson, I would say gone down a bit. Um, Honestly, I'm not that sold on Braden Yeager. I don't know, man.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't like him that much. I think that was actually a good trade for Pittsburgh, getting McGroarty for him.
Oh, without a doubt.
I think that's going to be a better trade for them kind of down the road. I'm not convinced. Like I was never high on Luca Pinelli anyway, but I mean, I don't really see him being an everyday NHLer either, to be honest with you. I didn't think Carter George was going to be this good. I think his stock's going up a little bit for me. Like, I think he might even be in like the top 10 goalie prospects as of right now, like currently not in the
Yeah,
NHL. Like seriously, he's that good. Another goalie that I think his stock's gone up is the Czechia guy Hrabal. I mean, he had a lot of question marks last year. He wasn't really that good in college. He had a really poor juniors, but I mean, he's kind of turned it around not only this season, but I think he's playing really well in this tournament as well. And one other guy, I mean, his stocks remains the same to me, but it's still really good, is Sandin Pellikka. I mean, we haven't talked about him at all yet. He's unbelievable. I kind of already looked at him as a potential first pairing number one quarterback defenseman before this tournament started, but I think he's just kind of proven my theory right here that that's probably what he's going to be. And I think just like Dvorsky, he's stepping into the NHL next season.
yeah. For me, I agree with you there on Dvorsky and Sandy and Pelika. Like, I think those guys maybe their stock hasn't raised as much because, like, if you really knew these players, you knew that were sort of capable of this. But I think more people are now aware of like who these players are and what they can do and what they will do in the NHL. Right?
One
Um,
guy I also kind of want to mention, sorry, before I meant to say this guy's name. And I know I've been kind of the person who, when we're talking about the Sabres, that they should kind of risk a little bit of their prospects a bit to kind of get better right now because they have such a stockpile of them. One guy that I felt like not that I thought they should trade, but I'd be willing to trade that now I wouldn't, is Anton Wahlberg. He plays in the AHL right now at Rochester. He's a monster, dude. I think he's going to turn into like a more of a power forward, kind of middle of the lineup, maybe top six type player. But I don't really think that's out of all the prospects Buffalo have, and even guys right now in the NHL, they don't really have a guy like him. And I think he's got honestly a chance to make the Sabres next season. He might not, but I mean, I think that a player like him is kind of a prospect they don't really have. And I think his stock's gone up a little bit for me. And if I was the Sabres and trying to make a trade and I was willing to give futures and prospects, I feel like he'd be one of more of the guys now that I wouldn't really be willing to move.
For me, two guys too that I'm looking at in this tournament, I think their stock is. I'll give you three here. The two that I'm really thinking of, Cole Eiserman, I think his stock is sort of coming back up here,
Did you
right?
see
Like,
like half the tournament he's been the 13th forward too?
which like doesn't make sense to me. Like
I know.
when you look at that goal against he had against Team Canada there, like that was a NHL
Yeah.
that like he has an NHL shot. There, there is like maybe some worry with him about his size and his lack of commitment on defense at times, but like he has an NHL shot, and the hardest thing to do in the NHL is score goals, and this kid can do that. And
Well, and the
like
Islanders can't score either, dude. So I
the
mean, he's
Islanders
gonna be a
can't score
perfect
either.
fit.
For me, his stock has gone up. James Hagen's, I think his stock's gone up a bit here. Like going into this year, it was really we were thinking he was going to be the number one overall pick, and there's been a lot of talk so far this year, right? Like him, Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa, Porter Mortone, like those four guys are all at a similar level. I think with James Hagens and the performance he's having here at the World Juniors, like he's not having an amazing performance, but he has 6 points through 4 games, right? Like he's above a point
Yeah.
per game in his draft year. I think it's really like I think for sure now it's like Matthew Schaefer, James Hagens is like the 1-2 picks in the draft, and then there's a
Really?
bit of a
Okay.
I think there's a bit of a gap, not a big one, but I think there's a touch of a gap between Porter Mortone and Michael Misa.
So that was actually
Like,
one thing I wanted to talk to you about, right? Because there's technically going into this tournament, there's more than three draft eligible guys, but we got Canada's got three with Martone, Schaefer, Ivan Kovic. The goalie's
yeah,
obviously a bit different. And then with the States, they got Hagens, right? Schaefer, dude, it's so unfortunate. This guy broke his collarbone
yeah,
draft year, having an
sucks, man.
incredible year in the OHL. Does that make you look at this differently? Like, I mean, Schaefer's probably coming back for the playoffs in the O, but I mean, like, do you think teams now are going to kind of look at this and be like, lean more towards Hagens, or do you think that doesn't really matter? Like, I thought Schaefer looked great when he was playing so
He
far.
he looked like Canada's best player when he was in the lineup.
That's what I mean. And it's just like it's he can dominate offensively and he's great defensively. He's such a good skater. It's just like, dude, I just see so much like comparison to Miro Heiskanen in his game, man, that like
Yeah,
I just think he could end up becoming. Right now, the injury doesn't affect my opinion on it. I think that just him being so young, and I mean, you could probably even throw him in college next year instead of rushing him to the NHL, right? Like he's just gonna turn 18 when camp's starting, basically.
yeah,
So I would still have him number one. I see it in Hagens. I don't know, man. Like I'm starting to do a little bit more research on this. Like I'm really iffy about number two, Misa or Hagens. I actually think it's pretty close. I think Martone's a little bit behind them. The one thing I will say, Martone's a great player, and he has that different dynamic, kind of that Kachuk. The one thing I think he struggles with, though, that I think some scouts are going to notice is he's not great at making plays at like a high pace. He's kind of more just like in there grinding it out, which is no problem with that, right? But I mean, like
yeah.
when you're getting to the NHL, I mean, it's going to be different, right? And it's going to be something he's going to have to work on. So I think at this point, like I'd be going, my opinion, it's Schaefer, then either Hagens, Misa, and then I'd go Martone at 4. But I mean,
Yeah,
I would have loved to see Misa in this tournament, dude, to see how it compared. But I think those guys are so close, man. And of course, like Hagens and Misa, they're both centermen. I mean, Hagens is more of a playmaker. I would argue he's probably a little bit more skilled. But I mean, like Misa scoring goals, right? Like we're talking about how hard it is to score goals in this league, right? So I mean it's gonna be tough at the beginning of the draft, dude. Like some people don't see Schaefer as the best player either. Like I see people that
yeah.
think Martone is the best player. Like, you know
And
what I mean? Like,
the other thing too is well, like one's a defenseman, one's a forward, right? So like depending on who has the number one overall pick, like if the Sabres have the first overall pick this year, I don't think they take Schaefer because then you're gonna have dude, like you're gonna have 4 left-hand shot defensemen in your top four,
yeah, no, I don't
which
think they would
you
take
can't do,
Schaefer.
right? So it's gonna be interesting too to see like how the draft lottery goes. Like we are still far away from that, but whatever team needs are could play a factor here as well. The one other player too, I think, who is draft eligible this year, Victor Eklund. I think his stock has risen a bit here too.
Yes,
Like
I agree.
I think we had him sort of. Me and you were talking. We had him within the top 15, maybe just on the bubble of top 10,
I'd
either
argue
inside or out.
he's talked himself into the top 10.
I'd say for sure he's in the top 10 now. I'd make an argument that you could probably have him over guys like Roger McQueen,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
the Caleb Descharnier guy that's playing in the
Yeah.
queue. Descharnier. Like I'd say Victor Eklund right now is probably for me anywhere between 6 to 10 maybe.
He honestly, dude, in my opinion, after 4, it's kind of a drop off. I could see, like, I mean, if everything goes right for him this year, I could see him going 5. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I just think after that top 4, it's kind of like we're not really looking at guys that might be like quote unquote like elite players. It's more like this guy might be a really solid second line center, or which is no problem with that, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's why it's kind of like if you're not picking in the top 4 this year, it's like I don't know. You're not going to really get a guy that's going to make a huge impact on your team, like kind of like a franchise changing player. You're just going to get like a really solid piece, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that.
But even like, would you argue, like, I know we're talking about the top now, but like, do you think that like Ivan Kovic has played his way to potentially be like a first rounder, like late first round? Because we're talking about this draft not even being that great and how it's a drop off after like the 4th pick. It's like, man, if you're talking about the late 20s, you're potentially going to get a guy that's what, like maybe going to be a really solid like third liner, which I mean is useful, right? But it's like if you can get a starting goalie, like who I think Ivan Kovic's probably got the potential at this point to be one. It's like, would you take a gamble on him at 25? Like, I don't know. Like, I might in a year like this.
Yeah, late first round, early second round, I'd take a gamble. It all depends too, because like I feel like this year's goalies for the draft, there's a
There's a
couple of
couple of good
them.
ones, dude.
There's a couple of good ones, right? So it's like maybe teams hold on a bit because they feel like they could get one like halfway through the second round, and
Yeah.
right because it's like for all these GMs in these scouting department, it's like how much of a gap is there between Ivan Kovic or the best goalie in the draft and like the fourth or third best goalie, right? So it's like if you think you can, like if you think Ivan Kovic's going to go
Yeah.
around 25, but the fourth best goalie in the draft is going to go late second round, there's not much of a gap between those two guys or between those guys, and then it's like, do you feel safer
All
holding
I'm saying,
on?
dude, is I'm thinking of this as in we're going to be getting one of your first this year, whether it's Florida or whatever. And if
Yeah,
it's 28, to be honest with you, if Ivan Kovic's there, I wouldn't have a problem with the Habs taking a flyer on him with our
even though you
second
guys
and
have
third.
Jacob Fowler.
What's the problem with having 2 really good goalies? You
Yeah,
might be able to trade one for something good in the future, right? Like, I don't know. It's more or less like we have a bunch of guys in our system that could potentially be like a 3C or something. It's just like I would prefer them to just kind of go a different route. But then saying that, I wouldn't really want to go too early on a guy like the fact that like Knight and Askarov went that high. I feel like they probably could have went a little bit lower, maybe. Like I thinking about it, like you know what I mean. But like I don't know. I mean, I'm saying that now. Who knows by the time the draft comes, right? Like, but I mean, Ivan Kovic was pretty impressive, man. Like, I mean, he was the first 17-year-old goalie to start in a game for Canada in 38 years. Like,
yeah.
that's crazy, dude. And like, he looked super comfortable in there. I mean, I don't really think any of the goals were kind of on him.
They
I think
should have won that game.
7 saves in the shootout. He looked super comfortable the entire time. The only thing about him is I think he's 5'11". I don't really know how much more room he's got to grow. So I don't know if he's going to be the top goalie taken in the draft or whatever. But him and Carter George have impressive Team Canada resumes before this tournament. So I mean, I kind of see why they were both goalies. And I mean, like I said, goaltending has not been this team's problem at all.
Yeah, it's not been an issue, the goaltending. The goaltending has been the high point in this tournament for Team Canada. Let's move on and we'll talk about award predictions here before we wrap up the podcast. So the 3 awards: best goalie, best defenseman, best forward. Mark, who do you have as the best goalie of the tournament?
Man, goaltending has been, we've talked about it. It's been pretty good in this tournament compared to other years. I mean, not a lot of blowouts. I'm kind of just thinking of more or less who I see kind of down the line in the finals because I mean, it's not like they won't pick someone that's in the bronze medal game, but I feel like it's more likely that they are going to pick someone that is kind of all the way. You know what I mean? That goes all the way. This might sound a bit nuts, dude. Since Feldsbergs is out, I don't really see him winning the award. I'd probably give it to him. I'm going to go with Hreyball and Czechia because I think that Czechia's got a chance to go to the finals, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they're good.
I mean,
Honestly,
not if they don't win. I just don't. I think Augustine kind of had a little bit too rough of a tournament to start the save percentage wise. You know, like I mean, even after that amazing game against Canada, like his save percentage overall isn't that great. Just because I also see like Rimpinen getting out in the quarters, like the Finland goalie. I think that's would probably be like my top 3-ish. George has been unbelievable too, but at the same time, I also see them losing today. So I mean, I'm kind of thinking about if they go all the way, you know what I mean? Czechia potentially going to the finals. I think Hreyball would be a huge part in that. I could see him winning goalie of the tournament.
honestly, dude, I'm going with Feldbergs. I think
Okay.
like he's not going as deep as some of these other goaltenders may go, but even with them losing here in the quarterfinals, it was a 50-shot game, right? So he was at 176 shots on goal going into this game. You add 50, he's going to be right. It's like somebody like Michael Rabel, for instance, right? He's at 94 right now. So even if he goes to the finals and they win it, like he still might not even be at that, like above
No,
200
I
shots
totally
on
agree.
goal.
I
So
totally
it's
agree
like
with you.
to put up a 9.25 save percentage and a 3 goals against average for Team Latvia throughout this tournament while facing over 200 shots. Like, I think I got to go with him, man. Like,
Not a bad pick.
what a phenomenal performance he had in this tournament. Let's move on and talk about the best defenseman now. This one's going to be a close one. Mark, who do you have?
Man, so close. I'm gonna go with Cole Hudson. I just think that with USA potentially going all the way, I see them winning it. I think he's going to have a huge part in it. It's kind of a toss-up between him and Sandin Pellikka right now anyway. Sandin Pellikka obviously started off with that hat trick. He's been awesome, man. This is a tough one, though, dude. Like, I mean, it could go either way, but I'm going to go with Cole Hudson.
I'm going with Sandin Pellikka on this one, man. He
Okay.
just picked up another point in this game over Latvia. Him and Cole right now, I believe that's going to give him the edge in Cole for points. So he has 9 points through 5 games. We'll see what Cole does here against Switzerland. Right now, I believe it's currently 2-0 for USA here heading into the intermission. But I'm going with Axel Sandin Pellikka just because Cole Hudson, like on that Team USA power play, Cole Hudson has a bit more weapons there, right? He only has 2 goals. He has 6 assists, which is phenomenal. But on that Team USA power play, not as impressive, I think, as Sandin Pellikka having 4 goals and 4 assists here.
Yeah.
Or 5 assists now, with including this Latvia game. But just since Sandin Pellikka has the 4 goals, I think I got to give him the best defenseman of the tournament. Lastly, to wrap it up, Mark, best forward, who do you have?
Buddy, it's going to be a tough one, man. I just don't know who I see kind of like popping off. Like, there's a lot of guys that are playing like really solid. Everyone's kind of pretty close in points here. Honestly, man, I feel like just because he hasn't got it going as much as we think, I'm gonna go with Ryan Leonard. And I know he's
Okay.
not kind of up there right now in the points, but I just feel like he's the kind of guy who these next 3 games he's gonna come out to play. And I mean, not that he hasn't, but I think he's gonna be performing, and I could see him being a huge part in US winning this thing.
So he looks like he just actually scored
Hell
here
yeah.
against Switzerland. Honestly, man, it's hard because the forwards are all so close right now, right? Like for defensemen,
In scoring, yeah,
it's
man.
it's kind of just the 2 defensemen there with Hudson and Pellikka that are standing out. But for the forwards, I'm gonna say James Hagens, dude.
Okay.
His
I think he's gonna
here's
have a
another
really good like medal round.
here's another goal here against Team Switzerland. So he has 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. I think he's looked pretty well so far in this tournament. I think if the USA wins the gold medal, he's going to continue to put up points on the board. I'm going to go with Hagens for player of the tournament in his draft year. That might be completely hot take. And
Well, that'll raise his stock, dude.
yeah,
That might put him up to 1 overall. Not a bad pick,
I'm
though, for sure.
I'm liking how he's looked so far. The other guy I kind of had in mind was Cole Eiserman, just because of
Yeah,
his scoring potential, right? Like
that's
he could have a
what I
hat
was
trick.
thinking. Yeah.
He could have a hat trick here against Switzerland, and like none of us would be surprised. So that's the other guy I sort of have in mind is maybe Cole Eiserman, but it's going to be interesting to see sort of what happens here. But that's pretty much going to wrap up the podcast for today. We covered a fair bit about World Juniors. We'll be back next week to wrap up the World Juniors tournament, talk about who won, and we'll be back talking about the NHL next week too. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for tuning in, everybody.